So I finally finished the game off after all of these years, and I thought it was pretty cool. Normally I don't make videos like this, but with all of the newfound attention, I should probably increase the amount of positive videos on my channel. Off feels like a game that just sort of has to click with you, and I think it did for me. It's not exactly an incredible game, but it still manages to be so unique and interesting after all these years that I can't help but love it. I think you just have to be the type of person to get so engrossed in the world, music, and presentation that you can overlook all of the game's weaker elements. The characters in Off are very likable, and they all have an elegant way of speaking that kept me thoroughly enraptured. The batter is mostly silent, but the little we do get to see him speak is very interesting. He will purify the world, and not a single thing will stop him. It's a personality you don't see often, especially in a protagonist role. I understand why everyone loves the judge. He's really entertaining. He's this terrifying caricature of a cat who ate an entire thesaurus, and despite that he still has all of the qualities of a cat. He's really funny and likable. The add-ons aren't really characters, but I still think they're pretty cool. They're just circles, but I think that enhances how ominous the world is. Them not having fully fleshed out personalities also helps keep the game more focused, while still helping to keep battles a bit more interesting. Zachary is pretty good. I'm not a fan of when games get all meta and go, haha, this is a video game, and I don't think Off does it especially well with Zachary. He just goes, hello protagonist, and you will need great gear for a video game, am I right? And it doesn't even really make sense in the story. This game was made in 2008 though, so it wasn't a tired trope by that point. When he puts on the judge mask and becomes a more significant character to the plot, he can be really fun. I can see why he's a fan favorite. The guardians of each zone are a mixed bag. Don has a creepy design and is pretty engaging whenever he's on screen, but he doesn't feel super fleshed out. I feel like that was a pun. The inspiration for Papyrus is lost on me, except for the design similarities. Can't believe they removed him saying fuck. Japhet is incredible, easily being the most developed out of all of them. I'm surprised I haven't heard of him before now. Maybe it's because his design is just a bird. His dialogue is all great, really encapsulating his whole identity as a mortal god. I don't know whether or not the credit would go to Mortis Ghost or the translation team. The way he acts like a parasite and takes control of Valerie is really cool, mainly thanks to the absolutely incredible artwork. It feels genuinely ominous. He's also easily the most important character, actually having an impact on the judge. That is all to say he might be my favorite character in the whole game. The fat guy is entertaining and pretty interesting during the conversation you have before his battle, although I think he was handled sloppily. The chase segment with him is hilarious, but it only happens because the batter says he's too strong to defeat for some reason. Then when it's over, he's suddenly so exhausted that he's defeatable. Not exactly built up too well. It all felt like things were just happening. The batter calling him a lardass was funny though. Hugo is a child that I enjoyed beating to death. The battles are incredibly stylized and easily the most iconic part of the game. Pepper Steak is a masterpiece, but they're actually pretty bad gameplay-wise. They're not terrible, they're well balanced, but they're just not all that engaging. You can go all out during every fight and you'll be fine. Resource management is non-existent. The skills you obtain aren't all that unique, being your basic healing, damage dealing, and status conditioning spells. The last add-on you get has some buffing spells, which I normally find very fun to manage in RPGs, but in Off they're so expensive to use and barely buff your stats that they're not worth it. You also only get them when you're around 70% done with the game. I'm not sure what could have been done to improve the combat. Adding action commands wouldn't be a great idea without completely overhauling the battle system, and doing that would take away from the game's tone and presentation. I just think something needs to be done to make the battles more mechanically complex. Final Fantasy works because you have so many characters with different classes and a million different spells and actions, but Off can't do that because of its setting and style. Enemy attacks are all the same too. Most of them don't require a unique response or affect party members differently. Sometimes they give you a status condition, but they tend to be negligible. The puzzles were actually pretty good. The ones that revolved around you figuring out a code to type in were just alright, but the ones that had more unique presentation were pretty interesting, especially the segments at the end.
Do you remember your mission, Wild?
You bet your hot anthro ass I do. I'm gonna need some cigarettes for this shit. If I don't make it back alive, I want you to know something, Sonichu.
Yes, Wild?
You're a faggot.
The plot is incredibly vague, being one of those games that's heavily up for interpretation, but I think I get the gist of what happened. It was never boring or annoying, and I was thoroughly engaged and enjoyed all of the characters, so I think it was good. I fail to see what the player being a character adds to the story. It fits tonally and adds some context to the choice at the end, but it could have been removed and had very little impact on the story as a whole. Probably for the best it's kept that way though, because then we could have a situation like Inscryption where the game is constantly interrupted to remind you it's a video game. And this was in 2008, so I'm sure it was pretty cool at the time. Going through all of the different zones to defeat their guardians was fun, and getting to learn how the world functioned was neat as well. It's like if you took one of the dream worlds from Yume Nikki and kept adding details until it became a functioning ecosystem. But unfortunately in Off you can't turn into a midget and explode. Missed opportunity for sure. None of the characters really develop past their original personalities, and I like that. Off isn't a story where anyone learns a valuable lesson or changes their perspective, unless you count the player and their choice at the end. The encounters with the zone leaders were fun, but all pretty standard. Nothing crazy ever happened that shook things up. The only exception is once again Japhet. His segment substantially develops all of the characters without being overly verbose, or delving into personal drama or conflict. Basically what I'm saying is there wasn't a random flashback to try and force some emotions out of the player. The contrast between the judge and the batter is heavily emphasized and leaves a lasting impression that can be felt throughout the rest of the game. When I played the game, I never noticed anything that felt like it directly inspired anything in Undertale, except for the genocide route, which I think Undertale actually executed far worse than Off, mainly due to the game's presentation. Undertale's rudimentary sprites and sort of shitty tile sets really serve as a detriment to the tone the route is going for. However, Off's entire art style is built around the concept of purifying the world. Undertale in comparison just feels like the route was slapped onto it. I feel like some kind of visual effect, like everything very slowly becoming more desaturated after each battle, and maybe dust slowly starting to fly across the screen the deeper you get into the route would help, but maybe that would be a bit cheesy. I still like the genocide route in Undertale. I think the characters being pushed to their limits and general reactions of everyone is really interesting, but it could have been handled far better. And Scott Falco had a point when he talked about levels of violence and execution points coming off as a stupid thing you'd hear in a creepypasta. I like the moral ambiguity of the ending, although I think One Shot did it a lot better, which thinking about it now is basically the same game. At least before Solstice completely ruined it, butchering the choice by making one of the options straight up wrong, because now the world isn't real and is just a computer simulation. Oh well, not a big deal. It was only the game's fucking namesake. And then they added a super shitty perfectly happy ending where everyone gets to go home and live happily ever after, completely missing the original point and draw of the game and its one-shot nature. And don't even get me started on how the game now gives you more than one shot. I get it's a paid experience now, so that's expected, but that's why the original game was made to be freeware, so it wasn't held to the obligation of a product. They made it so closing the game doesn't actually kill Nico, which was what gave the game its fucking stakes and tension. They remade the game a third time, completely butchering all of the meta elements by having it take place in a shitty fake desktop, emphasizing how the world isn't real even more, and making the final choice even weaker by some miracle. Is it morally right to destroy a world that's inherently just fucked, barely managing to function with disturbed people struggling to even speak? On one side, you'd be doing everyone a favor by ending their horrendous lives, but that could just be our perception due to how much more competently our world is, for lack of a better term, designed. But none of them actually want to die, and there are some really cool people who you grow attached to throughout the course of the game. It's a very interesting choice, and I think it's portrayed well for the most part. It ending with the song Over the Rainbow gave me some severe tonal whiplash, though. I think that was a poor choice. One more song made by the composer would have been great. The hand-drawn artwork is absolutely fantastic. This game's art style is easily one of the most captivating aspects, right next to the music. Mortis Ghost has such a unique and appealing art style. The judge is a terrifying creature, emphasizing all of the dangerous parts of a cat with his large, jagged teeth, and de-emphasizing all of the cuter aspects like with his eyes and ears. And he still manages to be cute in his own way. All of the human characters look good for what they are, but some variety in their designs would have been interesting, because right now they're like really depressed toads. Japhet is pretty cool, being a giant bird that crawls out of a cat's mouth, and the other three guardians all look visually distinct and appealing. The overworld sprites look incredibly derpy though, lacking all of the charm and creepiness of the hand-drawn sprites. The tile sets are also repetitive, and occasionally just painful to look at. I have no doubt they're someone's favorite part of the game, but more hand-drawn sprites would have been far better. That's completely infeasible in RPG Maker 2003 though, so I understand why that's not the case. Ideally, in a perfect world, Off would have been made in its own engine and not had its art crushed to such an extent. The game's music is great. I know. Another burning hot take from Fennekin. Put the keyboards away. The atmospheric tracks are lovely, and something I've been listening to on a day-to-day basis, but when the music becomes more traditional and adventurous, it feels natural, and it all sounds great. It sure would suck if it was all ruined somehow. The final boss theme is incredible, but the actual fight is so short and shallow that it isn't really given the focus it deserves. Pepper Steak is given a great introduction with the batter saying, "Prepare yourselves to receive my judgment," and it blasting in. The whiplash of the song matched with its subtle creepiness really emphasizes how fucked up everything is, I think. Toby Fox tried to mimic the use of samples in his version of the track, but it sounds a lot weaker. The actual sample just sounds repetitive and annoying, and it isn't emphasized as much as it was in Pepper Steak. It feels like a song that's trying really hard to be Pepper Steak without actually being Pepper Steak, and it's shockingly bad. They could have hired someone more fitting for the job, but Toby Fox is Toby Fox, so they went with him. I don't know, it's really hard to analyze music without getting really specific and drawn out. So yeah, the remake is pretty controversial, and for a good reason too. The new UI is actually pretty cool and perfectly stylized to fit the game, and I actually enjoy the new shop UI with the little portraits too. The new animations are an appreciated addition as well, despite being mostly unimportant. The frame rate is really smooth, probably just because it's made in Unity, but still. Admittedly, I think what the remake does is the best that could have been done for the battle system. Increasing the speed of battles, rebalancing competences, and giving the occasional enemy a buff to keep you on your toes. It all helps keep things more interesting. Showing when the enemy will attack also adds an extra layer of strategy that was desperately needed. Critical hits being telegraphed beforehand so you can actually play around them is fucking genius. I have no idea why more games haven't done that. Resource management is still hardly an issue though with how many save points there are. But yeah, that's kind of it. Everything else is either butchered or just underwhelming. The soundtrack was ruined, and while copyright is to blame for them being unable to use the original OST, that's still not an excuse for a lot of the terrible composition choices that detract from Off's unique identity. Yes, I'm mainly talking about Papyrus's theme. I trust that Toby probably was told to add it in. I doubt he has that much of an ego, but if I were him, I would have told Fangamer to fuck off and find a different composer, because that's an appalling suggestion. I'm sure mods will patch in the original OST though, so it's more of an inconvenience. They ruined the audio puzzle, making it way too obvious by adding a bar to the left of the screen. The word fuck was censored. Mortis Ghost had such a unique and appealing art style, and the remake didn't even attempt to replicate it. At all. Like seriously, what the fuck is this? What the fuck is this? Instead of going hand-drawn, it's all done digitally just using a textured pen. The overly dynamic poses and funny expressions are all gone. The batter looks way too normal, and the judge was made way cuter, basically becoming the opposite of his original design. I'm more so angered by how it does the absolute bare minimum for the most part. You know what I would have loved from an Off remake? A completely redrawn overworld mimicking the game's original style, and fully HD battle sprites. I have no reason to believe the original sketches aren't preserved somewhere, so not using them in the remake was massive missed potential. Off is easily the one RPG Maker game that deserved and needed a remaster the most, but what we're getting is incredibly disappointing. They didn't even make it in widescreen. What the fuck? It's made in Unity, what's the excuse? The battles are in widescreen, but that's just because they're uncomfortably zoomed in and it looks terrible. I'm pretty sure the only reason the game doesn't have actual widescreen is so they can show off the terrible letterbox artwork. So those are my thoughts on the game Off. I really enjoyed it. Disappointing, I know. I don't get to add another video to my Everything Sucks playlist, and now I can't make the joke where there's a playlist called Things I Like that's just empty. Fuck, no, my pen! No! So yeah, I appreciate my newfound popularity. I should have monetized my channel. I'm not exactly much of a video writer or whatever, honestly, so it's odd to be put in this position where I now have 100,000 views on one of my videos and like 5 different responses of varying quality. I don't go into any of my videos expecting them to get popular. I mainly see them as a holdover, voicing my more negative opinions on something until someone more competent can take over. Because it really does feel like discussion on the internet has gotten toxically positive starting with the 2020s. I'm primarily an artist. I've been slowly, barely working on my own webcomic for the last 3 years, just like Chris-chan, concerningly, despite how much I care about it. I just make a video on something whenever I feel a sudden burst of inspiration, and I feel like that's pretty obvious by my output. Maybe I'll try and make more videos though, since I do seem to have amassed a small group of loyal fans for my Deltarune videos, and it's not like I find the process unenjoyable. I feel bad for everyone who came before my Deltarune videos though, you guys are probably very confused. Basically, what I'm saying is, don't expect me to upload too often, but I appreciate the support.